fear?
The Avengers. That's what we call ourselves. Sort of like a team. Earth's mightiest heroes type thing.
Yes. I've met them.
Yeah. Takes us a while to get any traction, I'll give you that one. But let's do a head count here. Your brother, the demigod. A super soldier, a living legend who kind of lives up to the legend. A man with breathtaking anger management issues. A couple of master assassins. And you, big fella. You've managed to piss off every single one of them.
That was the plan.
Not a great plan. When they come, and they will, they'll come for you.
I have an army.
We have a Hulk.
Oh, I thought the beast had wandered off.
You're missing the point. There's no throne. There is no version of this where you come out on top. Maybe your army comes, and maybe it's too much for us, but it's all on you. Because if we can't protect the Earth, you can be damn well sure we'll avenge it.
Do you expect me to talk?
Hello and welcome to episode 124 of Do You Expect Us to Talk? I'm your host Becca, and as always I am joined by Earth's mightiest heroes, Chris and Dave. How are you both doing?
Feeling mighty, thanks.
Good evening, folks.
So you can be, which member of Avengers would you like to be if you could choose one?
Well, I think I'll be the Hulk because I'm pretty mindless, but what a body.
Pretty easy to get ripped, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because Dave is buff, you know.
Yeah. Well, I was. I'll put some clothes on there.
I'd be Black Widow because she looks good. She looks good in black, and she can like interrogate people without showing any signs of interrogation whatsoever.
She is very cool.
But that's the thing in the film, though. She's like, there's a constant thing of like, oh, I'm excellent at getting information. Well, like what information is she getting? It's never really established. It's just always like a superpower. It's just.
My worry is, Chris, that means by Age of Ultron, you and I will be dating.
that may be the reason, Dave.
Fair enough.
You heard it here
Robert
first.
Downey's not doing it for you anymore.
Clearly not. ScarJo
A relationship that everyone hates.
Yeah, fair enough.
A relationship
like
that when everyone thought, what, really? Where'd that come from?
Yeah.
Best
You
ever
know,
spin-off
if our
movie.
listeners ever sort of were placing bets on, I bet two of those get together. It wouldn't be me.
It'll be you two.
Yeah, Chris and Dave.
Match made in heaven.
That would be a twist.
Yeah, more of a twerk, really.
Not nipple twisty.
Got to experiment.
On that note, listeners, we have reached peak Do You Expect Us to Talk? Well, I am at the peak right now.
Fair enough.
On a very high point.
Tell us more, Becca.
I'm at a very high
Yeah,
point.
we're listening. And not touching ourselves, we promise.
No, I'm very excited because tonight we review Marvel's The Avengers. I'm very hard trying not to call it its UK name, so I shall refrain from saying it, lest I piss off Dave.
So just to clarify, this is the one with Sean Connery in, yeah?
Yes.
That's Ray Fiennes and Uma Thurman, you know.
Yeah, that's good. Just want to clear things up because that's the film I've watched. I mean, I'm not sure how it relates to Marvel, but apparently that's.
Yeah, I've been prepping weather jokes all day.
Let's list our favourite clouds. Cumulonimbus.
Yeah.
That's the only line that I can remember from the film.
Okay.
So anyway, we're reviewing
How now,
Marvel's
brown
The
cow.
Avengers.
There you are.
Oh, that's the one. Oh dear. And Sean Connery camping up as there are the
Do
camping
you know, I
villain.
have to admit, before you go any further, I've not seen it. I've not seen 1998, so I haven't seen it.
Yeah, you're not missing out.
It came out to such toxic reviews, I never saw it.
No, you're not missing.
I mean, it is shit, but it does feature Sean Connery killing a bunch of board members dressed as teddy bears.
Yeah, I had a
Yes,
vague memory
I've
of
heard about
bizarre
this.
teddy bears, and I thought, yeah, that rings a bell.
Did Sean Connery do anything fun after that film? I mean, it was right near the end, wasn't it? Because he retired 5 years afterwards.
He did Entrapment.
Entrapment, that was it. That was fun.
A League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
That was a bit crap.
I don't want to say Finding Forrester, but I'm not sure the years. Yeah, that was out. And I know The Rock was. This must be after The Rock.
The Rock was.
Yeah, The Rock was
96?
it earlier.
Yeah, something like that.
That was great fun.
Okay. All totally fucking irrelevant, Becca. So tell us about tonight's film.
As you know, we like to keep on track of the film we are reviewing.
Yeah.
So yes, tonight we review Marvel's The Avengers, starring everybody: Robert Downey Jr., Samuel L. Jackson, Scarlett Johansson, Mark Ruffalo, Chris Evans, no, not that one, Jeremy Renner, Chris Hemsworth, Tom Hiddleston, Kobe Smulders, and many, many more.
And Billy Zane, if you can spot him.
Stan Lee, if you can spot him.
Harry Dean Stanton, if you can spot him, he's in it.
Yeah, he is actually.
And we did make it clear that Christopher Lee's in every film as well, so he's in here somewhere.
As seen behind the screens.
Selling shawarma.
Got a fun fact about that at the end of the show.
I bet it's fun. Can't wait.
Yes, shawarma is delicious. So written by Joss Whedon and Zach Penn, with a score by Alan Silvestri, and directed by Joss Whedon, and released in 2012. One of the best years in living memory.
Really?
I think so. Well, certainly in terms of being English and being British. I mean, personally for me, 2012 was a bit of a shite year. But in terms of culture, I mean, like we had obviously Jubilee, Olympics, Avengers, lots of really good films come out of the year.
Dark Knight Rises.
Dark Knight Rises, Bond as well. My top 3 films of that year probably Bond, Avengers, 1A and 1B, and then Dark Knight Rises definitely. But just in terms of everything that was going on in 2012, in terms of pop culture, music, cinema, film, theatre, it was just a massive, massive year. And for me, it will go down as like one of the best years of all time. I'm sure there's a lot of political turmoil in the background as well.
I can't remember.
Lots of negativity as there is, all over the world.
I don't remember this amazing year, but then to be fair, I barely watched any of the Olympics. Can't get that excited about a fucking Jubilee. Think Skyfall was okay. Thought The Dark Knight Rises was a massive drop down from the first 2 Nolan films. But you might be right on tonight's film.
Definitely. Well, certainly for me, it's a high point. Just remember going seeing it on my friend's birthday as well, and that was always a good laugh. But yeah, no, I'm not that I'm like a royalist or anything like that, but it's quite, it's a big thing to be celebrating the Jubilee.
Yeah.
And it's quite important because obviously
I just remember
a lot of people sort of negate like the importance of the royal family, but it's just like we do have them. It's our main export. There we are.
There wasn't long to run on my marriage back at this point, but I remember being with my mother-in-law, as was then, who was quite an old lady, and she used to say some inadvertently funny things, because it got to the point where Bond and the Queen jumped out of the helicopter or plane or whatever it was. Right, and she lands, supposedly, and then the Queen pops up and sort of walks along to where she's sitting. And my mother-in-law, with a completely straight face, said, "Do you know, I don't think that was her."
Your mother-in-law was right.
Oh, I was like, how do you do it, Holmes?
Sherlock, you've done it again.
Yeah, brilliant, thanks. I fell about laughing and she just looked at me like she could not understand what I was laughing at. I thought, well, did you think anyone thought that was an 85-year-old?
Really, that actually wasn't the Queen.
Yeah. Obviously it was Daniel Craig.
Well, obviously on a sad note, that stuntman has now passed away, sadly. So...
He just ruined the whole...
Did his parachute not open, or...?
No, he was in some accident many years after.
Oh, okay.
But yeah,
Tom Cruise to do it.
Yeah, no, it's just in terms of pop culture for me, in terms of the films that came out, I was just like 2012 is going to be massive, and I got swept away by the whole thing. So for me, it will stand out as a very happy year in terms of culture. But personally, for me, for events I won't go into, it was generally shite. But anyway, I really enjoyed this film, and for me, it's a highlight of the year. And I think when we get in terms of ranking, it will rank very high, if not atop of the list of the Marvel movies.
Spoiler alert from Becca.
Spoiler alert.
That's just ruined the whole thing. I love that she said that her top one would stay top, whatever comes out next. And I thought, that's really watching Captain Marvel and Avengers 4 with an open mind, isn't it?
I'm sure it's probably going to be like the best film ever. I'll come out of Captain Marvel and be like, oh!
Yeah.
But...
I mean, look, to be fair, this is pretty spot on in terms of what it needs to be. Because it almost, I wouldn't give it a perfect scoring, but it is pretty much exactly what was required. And it definitely, I think the whole the Marvel not say fan base, but how the popularity of Marvel just exploded with this film. And I think, from here on in, Marvel's just been this unstoppable force.
This was where the whole zeitgeist around superhero films changed entirely. In 2008, we had The Dark Knight, and that really, really captured the imagination. It changed what superhero films were for a few years. Not necessarily for the better, because suddenly you had studio heads saying that they'd be making all of their superhero films as dark as they could possibly manage, and even as late as things like Man of Steel, which I'm kinder to the most, but it's darker than it arguably would have been without that sort of Nolan influence. You had a Spider-Man reboot in 2012 where everything was at night and a bit dark and gritty, and he bled and all that kind of stuff. Then, of course, there's a Batman film scheduled for this year, and frankly, both in pop culture reach and box office, the Avengers absolutely blew it away. And that wasn't necessarily a given before we got here, because Phase 1 had been patchy, I think. I think on balance, I look back and say it was good, but the constituent parts were kind of mediocre. I mean, Iron Man was terrific. The Hulk, not so much. Iron Man 2 wasn't great. Thor I'd found underwhelming. Enjoyable. I really don't mean to be unkind to Thor, but it was just a little bit cheap and a little bit perfunctory and everything I said in my review. And then Captain America I hadn't really warmed to, and I didn't really warm to him in this film that much either. My current feelings on Captain America date from sort of after that and has retroactively improved what came before. This film came out, and I mean, it did $1.5 billion at the box office, which I don't think was expected necessarily. I think had it done Dark Knight money, maybe sort of $1 billion, that might have been a bit more expected. But we didn't know what we were going to get. We didn't know if it was going to work. And it would have been no surprise had it come out, done 800, 900, maybe $1 billion, and then maybe The Dark Knight Rises had come out and done 1.2, 1.3. I think it was still not necessarily the case that this was going to be the preeminent film of that year. And it turned out to be. And what helped with that is some of the other big ticket items that were coming that year got delayed. There was going to be a second Star Trek film. There was going to be Man of Steel was originally supposed to be later in 2012. And so this film ended up sort of grabbing the whole sort of summer real estate to itself, really. And The Dark Knight Rises not only just about did what the previous film did, and significantly less in the United States, which is where the sort of opinion formers tend to live, but it not only did it do sort of, but critically it was thought to be a bit underwhelming. I know the film's got its defenders, and I'm quite willing to respect that, but it's seen as the weakest of the Nolan trilogy. And I would say for a majority that's probably true. Fans tend to argue about the first two. So I don't know that we knew what we were going to get here. And since this, Marvel have stepped up another notch, both in standard, because I think Phase 2 is slightly stronger than Phase 1 on average, but also Iron Man 3 followed this and did something like 1.3 billion of itself as well. So this was a game changer. This was a game changer.
I would definitely agree. I think, number one, this probably put Hiddleston on the map for a lot of people, and certainly in terms of US audiences, which is monumental, I must stress. Sorry. And then obviously we wait a few years later, we'd have Hiddlebum, which is all very exciting.
Which I've only ever heard from you.
What's Hiddlebum?
I don't know. It sounds really twee as well, doesn't it?
It's basically from The Night Manager, where we see his bum.
Oh, okay. So basically, it's Tom Hiddleston's bum.
Yeah,
okay.
which is a very fine thing. But anyway, that's enough for me to perv over. But no, I would definitely agree with all of you about.
You disgust us. Let's be honest.
Well, I've been hanging out with you for God knows how many years, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least we have the good grace to be all about the front bottom.
I don't really have much luck with that, so.
Really? I'll send you some photos, see if we can change your
Oh
mind.
God.
Anyway.
No, thank you.
All right, fair enough. You try and help somebody out, and you just get it thrown back in your face.
Well, I'm very sorry.
In terms, all right. So, talking about first thoughts for me, I think I had a really good viewing this time, and I think the reason I say that is I've always perceived this to be what it needed to be. Now, what I mean by that is, I knew when Loki was the villain that it was almost like a first step. That it was almost a proof of concept film. That they would step up the threat in future films. They would introduce more people in future films. I thought this film would end up looking a bit quaint, actually, going backwards. Once we had something like Civil War and Infinity War, though we didn't necessarily at this point know what those films were going to be. And the other thing is, on first viewing, I found the first sort of maybe 40 minutes of the film unbelievably clunky. I just thought the whole way they tried to get the film going just felt so awkward. The way they had to explain Thor's presence, the way they had to sort of try and bring Hawkeye in, and he hadn't been really introduced properly. And at that point, DC should have been watching and going, let's introduce these people first before we throw them right into the mix in a team-up film. And I just found it very, very awkward to begin with. Nothing properly explained, and just some excuse to get them all in the same place. I didn't really find that this time at all. When I watched it, I thought the film just flowed so much better. Yeah, I think Loki is kind of a convenience as a villain in some respects. But really, my only complaints with this film are some of the effects are starting to date now. It's a $220 million budget, which is healthy, but it's not extreme like some of the budgets that have come afterwards. And some of the blue screen work in the New York sequence is now really obvious, that they're sat on a stage with, this digital sky put in behind them. It was also the birth of what I and only I seem to call the sort of Marvel vanilla sky. Whenever you watch a Marvel film now, or frequently, and we certainly didn't see it in earlier entries like Hulk or Thor or anything, they seem to digitally replace the sky. And the sky seems to have almost this slightly vanilla tinge to it. It's kind of stylized. And I felt that sort of debuted here, and we've seen it ever since. So this is the first Marvel film that really, really nails that Marvel tone fully. It is the kind of thunderball of this series in some respects, where you go, right, you've got it now. You've totally, totally got it. I had a wonderful time with it, I have to say. I didn't get bored at any point. There are a couple of sequences that show me, and we'll talk about them when we get to them, that really show me that Joss Whedon understands comic books to a degree that I probably don't, but I can see he does. And the way he sort of moves between different characters working. There's a shot in this film that takes place about an hour and 51 minutes in, where we kinetically move between all of the different Avengers and what they're doing in New York at the same time. And that just works phenomenally well. The humor in it is a step up, where really they hadn't been notably that funny the first few films. And funny enough, the one thing I've got wrong in preconception before we came to this series was I remember thinking of Thor as quite dour. Funnily enough, after the first Iron Man, the funniest Phase 1 film is probably Thor. There's quite a lot of sort of humour in that. But this is a step up again. Joss Whedon, the hiring of Joss Whedon, where I don't necessarily know a lot of his work, but I know that he's very good at sort of the interplay between people and a lot of humour and good lines. And he really nailed it in this film. I think I also, it put to bed a lot of, having just critiqued an effect, but it's only a minor critique. Thank God for Industrial Light and Magic, because Rhythm and Hughes had done the Hulk film, and the Hulk had looked fucking terrible. And I was a bit worried that when they brought the Hulk in, on top of having to animate Iron Man, all the effects around Thor, Cap having to sort of move unlike a normal human being, alien species, Loki's tricks, and all the rest of it, I just thought they're not going to have the money to do this justice. So the fact that they brought in a Hulk that not only looks like I want Hulk to look, but actually looks like the actor who plays him, finally, that looks like Mark Ruffalo as hulked out. Yeah, I had the greatest of great times with it. There's one other film in this series I'm convinced I'll rank ahead of it, but I can't be too sure about anything else. I think this still stands up. And when I thought it was going to look a bit twee going forward, because remember when it was only 5 of them and we thought that was a big deal? Actually, the team-ups that have come since have all had the slight flaw of like overstuffing that this doesn't have. And then you've got something like Age of Ultron, which I was ready to be done with Whedon. And we'll talk about it when we get there, and I'll be fairer to Whedon than I am now, because I think he was put under difficult circumstances. But when I was enjoying Age of Ultron, but consciously thinking, I'm glad this is Whedon's last, because by the time it came out, I think it was pretty clear he wasn't going to come back.
I was going to say, to be fair, it wasn't. It's Quantum of Solace syndrome, really. It's not really his fault. I've got just on an offside there, obviously due to like Buffy and other things that he's done. I'm a big fan of Joss Whedon. I think around the same sort of time he did produce a really fantastic Shakespeare adaptation. Much Ado, I think it was, which I shall edit and find out later on. Which again had pretty much most of this sort of cast in. So it's kind of like a,
was that the black and white one?
Revolving door. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, I never saw it, but I remember it coming out. I think with Age, I mean, I don't really want. Yeah, I will do genuinely.
I can lend you the DVD.
What is it when you're sending us DVDs? Firstly, have a fucking word for yourself. DVD.
I'll watch it with Blu-ray, but I just thought it'd be fun.
Yeah, but the point is, I don't want to critique Age of Ultron here, but just as
we'll do it next time.
But just as a little sort of precursor, there are little scenes included there that don't need to be there, aren't finished, don't refer to things that are never brought up again, and seem to be Marvel doing what Marvel did in the bad old days of trying to trail future films. And because Whedon didn't carry on with it, arguably those things weren't sort of picked up and run with. And I just found it a bit tired. There were a few things in Whedon's action as well where I thought, I'm fed up with seeing that beat again. And we'll talk about it when we get there. But what I think I'm saying is that I thought, we got an A grade film here tonight, and I thought that once they'd nailed it and proved they could do the team ups, that we'd get A+ and A double plus kind of films following it. And to some people maybe we did, but actually in some respects less is more. The team ups are exciting and they service multiple sort of fan threads, because people who like Cap get a bit of that, people who like Iron Man get a bit of that, and everyone gets something. But there is something about them limiting it to the 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever it might be that works quite well, and it gives me hope for Avengers 4, because they've necessitated having to do something like that with the 4th one, with the way Infinity War ended. So apart from a few effects that maybe are reflective of a good budget but not an astonishing budget, this film still stands up as one of the finest things the Marvel Cinematic Universe ever created. And I think on top of that, what really adds to it is the whole comic book landscape. Yes, it was all set into trained by Iron Man, but it spun on this film and the relative critical underperformance of The Dark Knight Rises. This film changed the cinematic world. Not always for the better, the Dark Universe, anyone? The DC Extended Universe, anyone? But it totally
Any
changed
other universe since then?
Any other universe at that stage, to be honest with you. But it changed what we thought film could be going forward, but it also
changed kind of the cinematic landscape, really, didn't it? Not just for superhero movies, but just like film in general.
Yeah.
So
that's why we're getting the Tanner spin-off.
Yes, and we're getting the Moneypenny spin-off and the Jinx spin-off. And
that's really the sort of my opening thoughts on it. That it's very easy to talk about and it's very difficult to land. And whilst nothing is quite perfect in this film, the bits they got right overwhelm the very, very minor things they got wrong. So still a very, very good piece of work. And this is the film that made the Marvel Cinematic Universe, despite being film number 6.
Yeah, I think this film doesn't put a foot wrong for the most part. I mean, you can have like criticisms of like, okay, we didn't introduce Hawkeye properly, though I actually, even at the time, I thought it's quite a genius way to have him in the story, but not have him as let's give him an origin that's like trying to explain him, but have him almost as a villain who then, well, not as a villain, but basically give him like a villain type role, but then they also have a reason for him to be in the team up as well. It's like, no, I want payback. So it's basically a very crowd pleasing film. I think if think about other films, there are other deeper films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe than this, but as a whole, this film just knocks it out of the park in terms of entertainment-wise, and there's just a certain joy to have to actually see these characters interact with one another. I think that's what a lot of the comic book fans had from it. It's like, okay, you see Tony and Bruce get on to being all sciencey and stuff, and there's little things like that, and Tony square off with Iron Man. No, that makes no sense whatsoever. Tony square off with Captain America. And just little things like that make you go like, oh, and Hulk fighting Thor and things like that. Just really crowd pleasing moves that actually new. And as Dave said, it was the first film I think generally that just embraced the fact that no, this is a comic book, and it feels very much like a comic book brought to life. And yeah, I think as you go through the film, there is very little it does wrong. It knows exactly what it is, and it knows exactly what it needs to do. And it knew exactly what it needs to be to work and to actually sell this whole universe as a whole. Because I think had this film had come out and it would have been a bit, it was all right. Would we have the Marvel universe today? Maybe not, or it maybe not be as big as it is. So
probably not if you fluff the team up.
Yeah,
if you fluff the team
you
up,
hit the nail on the head there, Chris. I think it has
you can still have the team up. You can still have the universe, but what you probably have is much looser connected threads. Probably where DC are going now. That there's no talk of any further Justice League films, but we are still getting Aquaman, probably because it was in transit beforehand. But we'll get these films that are still DC Universe, that are still kind of in continuity.
They're still working it out, aren't they?
But they're just buying themselves time till they can think about how you may even get these people together again. And I think that's where Marvel would have been left.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, had this definitely the Goldfinger or the Thunderbolt of the Marvel world.
Yeah, had this been like Iron Man 2 kind of level, it would have been a bit okay. Let's see what we could do.
And they would have, and the trouble is, it would have been a second strike as well, because I know some people like Iron Man 2, and that's absolutely fine, but it got it wrong in trying to universe build, because then every now and again it would look at the camera, wink, and say the Avengers, and it was kind of, if they had done that in the Avengers, well, obviously they wouldn't have winked and said the Avengers, but if they had fundamentally fluffed that sort of team up and building again, we would have probably thought, well, that's the second fucking time you've tried to do that, and it's not working, is it? So they had to nail this, and Joss Whedon was a particularly wise choice, because somehow, in the nicest possible way, he finds a lightness of tone and just takes all the stress out of it. It doesn't suddenly have this pretentious, important feel to it. It's actually much more just, let's get these people together and just have them riff.
That's the best thing about Whedon. That's why I really enjoyed that he, at the time, he was the right man for the job, because he's got that comic book background as a writer and a comic book fan as well, as a Marvel fan above all else. And he could, for me, he was the only person who could bring that, as you say, lightness of tone, along with Zach Penn, to proceedings. Otherwise, it would have, had it been like another, like Dark Knight, for example, it would have fallen flat on its backside.
I think you need to be different as well. If the other team have been all dark and serious, you need to go like more lighter tone.
Exactly. And you've got all these conflicting personalities as well. And for what it was sort of coming, some of its parts at the time, it was, well, quite light-hearted, and more kind of like, okay, so it's DC being more dark and moody, so therefore Marvel, we're going to be more colourful, more bright, a little bit of humour, but still, very action-heavy.
Yeah, I also think this film's actually structured really well, because everything seems to make sense. You start with Fury, who introduced the threat, and then you introduce like individual characters. They get together, they don't quite get on. Shit hits the fan. They kind of scramble some sort of victory, but everything sort of seems to be sort of going wrong, and then they all get together at the end to fight the baddie and win the day. It's a pretty simplistic structure, but it's simplistic because it works.
It's a typical structure, isn't it? But as I say, it's a well-trodden path. And along various genres, there is a version of that. across all all stories that you can tell within mankind. And yeah, I think it's a well-trodden path, but it works. We've seen it work, and it will continue to work.
That's the one thing that sort of caps, no pun intended, the level of a team-up film, because they've always felt more like product to me. Now it's all product. I'm not pretending that The Winter Soldier is some little indie film with some auteur on it at all, but there is an element of committee about this film, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does mean that a very, very well done individual film is always going to be it has possibly a higher plane of ambition in some respects.
It's going to have more weight to it, isn't it?
Whereas this is the ambition in all this is purely scale, making this work with all the different tones. I mean, the Thor score and soundtrack, if you like, doesn't sound like the Iron Man soundtrack or the Hulk soundtrack, and later on the Guardian soundtrack, and so on. And even getting that into one cohesive whole that just doesn't look like a mess. It's easy to do in comic book panels. It's not easy to do here. The other thing, of course, is, going forward again, something like Civil War, I've heard complaints in the past, which I sort of understand, but that airport fight looks small scale. Well, you can't have 200 heroes on the screen and make any kind of cohesive film out of that. So there's already an immense amount of ambition in what they've done here.
Also, not to the score, I think, as well. I know, like, it's seen Marvel scores aren't really rememberable, but I think the Avengers theme is pretty distinct, and I think when you first heard it, you think that's memorable.
Yeah, definitely.
I would agree as well. I mean, I kind of.
Though I did get it confused with the modern Captain America.
There are similarities,
yeah.
but it's the same man. Comes from a similar place.
I thought Henry Chapman did the.
Well, they did, but I don't see that it's a different. It's the same thing, Chris. It's just arranged differently.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's yeah. So I don't want anything that I say here to be taken as like a major criticism. I'm just saying that the goals you're trying to meet when you make an Avengers film are different than the goals you meet when you're trying to make a Captain America film. That's all. And that's not a bad thing. And frankly, without them continually building to these kind of team-ups, you lose a lot of purpose in the whole universe as a whole. So you always need to be building to something like this. And if the Avengers hadn't have got it right, it wouldn't have been game over because they'd had 4 or 5 successful films, but it would have been game over for the Marvel universe as it's currently conceived. It would have been different.
And well, what a difference it does make. I think this film was vital to Marvel's success ultimately.
Oh,
and
definitely, yeah.
And it all kicked off from here.
There.
Yeah, it all
for sure.
Yeah.
Had we not had this one,
Iron Man started.
I don't think we'd have the rest that would follow it.
Yeah, Iron Man started the spark, and this was just when it just caught fire.
It's kind of literally just like the flame in any exploding situation.
Yeah.
What am I trying to say? There's a thing I'm trying to grasp at straws.
Yeah. No, you're like the fuse. You've just.
Oh, no, explosion situation. That's the one.
You've quoted Miranda Frost.
I know. I'm all about the quantum and all about Die Another Day.
Yeah.
What quote was that?
That's when she's talking to M and she's asked,
given the really
what do
cheesy.
you know of James Bond? And she reads a fucking trailer.
Yeah.
She's first, ask questions later.
Yeah. Death for breakfast. Sex for dinner. I just think, oh, fuck's sake.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay, with that, let's discuss this film sequentially. So, the first 40 minutes...
That's my phone. I must turn it off. There we are.
My first thoughts... I was quite worried when this film started. Because it just didn't... It didn't anchor itself in anything. It sort of started... And it took me the longest time on first viewing to work out where this film was even going. And it seemed to take an interminable time to get them all together. That complaint's gone away now, and I almost don't know where it came from. Because it's actually reasonably efficient. We get a little bit explaining where Loki's coming from. We go straight to sort of Nick Fury. We see Maria Hill. We see Eric Selvig working. We see that this tesseract has started to sort of radiate some energy. which immediately seems to make them think of Bruce Banner. And then basically the thing opens and Loki walks through. Have I gone too fast there, or is that?
Oh no, I mean
that's pretty much
the first like 5 minutes.
Yeah, we're introduced to Chitauri, aren't they, in terms of like the aliens, the alien invaders of this film.
Yeah.
And the other, do we see the other pretty much early on?
We do.
As he's kind of basically Loki's partner in crime for this whole shenanigans.
Yeah. We later find out. I mean, we can later infer that what Loki has there, that scepter, he's basically been given the one Infinity Stone Thanos has to basically go and take Earth.
Yeah, let's believe that we are kind of all ready to...
Speculate to accumulate. He's been given an Infinity Stone to go and help him get the other one.
So off you go.
And subjugate Earth.
But no, we ain't going to stand for this bitch. But yes, no, that's the first 5 minutes of the film, which is very exciting.
Yeah, and then, so... I don't know about you, but is Loki a different character here than he was in Thor?
Explain.
He's been given more agency, I will say.
He just doesn't seem like here. He's a lot more like malevolent. He's a lot more aggressive.
He didn't stand out in Thor on first watch. He does now, but I think that's retroactive.
Yeah.
That I look back on it and go, yeah, I really like Loki, and I always have. So it's like, yeah, great, it's Loki. On first viewing, he was just a sort of Weasley little brother.
On first
I would say he's kind of more like, because within Norse mythology, he's kind of obviously known as like the god of like the first film is kind of typically more like god of mischief, for example. So like kind of replicating himself and not being a very minor threat, despite creating the giant fire creature. But here it's probably more like the god of malevolence, I will say. So there's a scene early on, much later on, in Germany where he actually rips out somebody's eye, and I think, I remember like every time I watch that I just wince. And I just think, really? But yeah, he's much more malevolent.
I bet you didn't see that coming.
But I was waiting for your punning there.
Sorry.
Hashtag sorry, not sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think in the first film, it was a lot more a complicated character, a guy who's like very complex and going through a lot of stuff that he wasn't sure of himself. Here, he's very much like your archetypical villain. I'm here to take over, and I'm gonna. But I do wonder whether that was a deliberate choice, because there are parts of this film where he does not look well. Like he has a sickly look in his face.
I think that's the whole point of him.
Even though why he's like smiling. So I do wonder whether.
Well, even like the first time you see him, literally when he arrives, literally on kind of like a crouching position, and his face is kind of like at that kind of angle where like he looks, even though he's kind of like smiling kind of dementedly, he looks kind of almost distorted. I would say this is making a massive leap, but it's similar to kind of like Joker from the original kind of the film with Jack Nicholson, for example, where his features do kind of like twisted and distorted.
Smiling.
In 2012, it felt like a convenience because Loki hadn't massively excited me in Thor. So when they brought him in as the bad guy here, it felt proof of concept. It's like, well, let's just have him as the villain this time and see how we do. I don't necessarily feel that way about it now, but it affected this sort of setup phase of the film, because he comes in and within seconds he's enslaved Selvig and Clint Barton. And it just all felt a little bit convenient.
A little bit too easy. It does it very quickly as well.
Within seconds, this thing is overloading the tesseract. And then suddenly they're in some sort of like vehicle trying to get out of the place before it blows. And I'm just thinking that this film hasn't taken me with it yet. Like I say, I'm not sure that's the way I feel now.
I think it's one of the things, because it's a cog in a giant machine, isn't it? Like, it's all set up for the big bad.
Yeah.
Who we all know. Spoiler alert. But I think it's one of those things where now we can look back on it and say, okay, it was a part in a larger there's a piece in a larger puzzle. But we can appreciate a lot more. But at the time, just kind of feel like, well, is he really suitable enough to be the big bad for this particular episode?
I think also, Becca, the second part of the first act is much better. Because this is the first part. I always thought it was about 40 minutes. It's not. It's more like 15. The second half of the first act, if you like, is getting the team together. And S.H.I.E.L.D. just looks so efficient in that. They don't panic immediately because you've got Fury going to get Cap, which I like, and then you've got like Coulson going to get Stark, and you've got him getting hold of Romanoff, and he's completely calm despite the situation we can see she's in, and we'll come on to that in a second. And then she has to go and get Banner, and all of that is terrific, and I think it introduces people really great. It's really, really good. So they send, because basically Romanoff is basically tied to a chair, isn't she?
Yeah, she's being interrogated by some Russian dude. But no, I think just because I make a point about how calm and collected the S.H.I.E.L.D. appear, it's just so, I was going to say, use a stark contrast there to how collapsed they are later on. And certainly for those people out there, if you still watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., how collapsed everything has become since so far along in the series. I know the two are quite removed from each other now, but at this sort of time, certainly when the series began, they kind of were meant to run concurrently with another. If that makes sense. Sorry for bad grammar. But obviously now it's kind of gone their separate ways almost due to a plot device.
Your terrible grammar just left me thinking, where am that watermelon?
Where am that watermelon, yo? Not quite racist though. But yeah, definitely in terms of, it just kind of sets up, how cool and calm and collected they are and how much of a smooth operation things are. Despite, and obviously there's kind of, you see the council as well, Jenny Agutter and
Powers
Stacey
Booth.
Keach.
And Powers
Booth,
that just always looks evil.
He does, he always looks villainous, whatever he does. But he's a very legendary actor, so, along with other legendary actors in the role.
Yeah. I don't know if Jim Robinson was there at this point, I can't remember.
Does he have a heart attack?
Well, no, I think Jim Robinson took over Powers Booth in that role.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, he did.
Yes.
Definitely.
Jim Robinson, who had a heart attack whilst playing inappropriately with a child.
Oh dear. But no, it's just one of those things where like they are kind of meant to be looking quite as as if very much they're in control of the situation. But then obviously as they slowly start to crumble as Loki kind of gets hold, it just serves up, one against the other really. So they when they're up, they're really up. When they're down, they're down.
Well, let's talk about the individual introductions then. So the first one that I can remember is Romanoff. So she's tied to a chair, takes a phone call, and she's immediately
she's getting interrogated, quotation marks, when she's doing the interrogation.
And as soon as she takes the phone, it's like, I've got them where I want them. Yeah. And that was funny. And
what are you on about?
And while she's going to get herself out of that, she basically has to get herself out of that immediately, which means basically like fighting them whilst tied to a chair and then sort of throwing herself over to break the chair away and all that. Phil Coulson's on the phone completely cool. He just sounds like he's on hold.
Yeah,
he's waiting to talk to someone at his back.
It's great comic timing, isn't it?
It's brilliant.
Yeah,
fantastic.
And I'd not been sure about Phil Coulson to this stage. That scene actually sold me, even though he did so little, because I just thought that's perfect.
Again, you served up little snippets of him, mightn't you? And you can think, he's obviously running the operation.
But he was quite a dull character
number two
in the
from
earlier
Fury.
film.
But here,
he wasn't given a lot in the earlier film, so he was a bit dull. He
has much more to do.
He was almost like a civil servant-y type. Whereas here, when he rang her and he's on the phone just like waiting politely, I just thought, I may be overselling it, but I just thought that's genius.
And also when he goes to see Iron Man as well, obviously there's a backstory between him and Pepper as well, which I want to know more about. So
the film shows us that Romanoff is free. She's got to go to Calcutta to get Banner. Because she's told to go get the big guy, and she thinks he means Iron Man. He goes, no, I've got him.
The other big guy.
I've got Stark. Go and get the other big guy. I can never remember which order it happens in.
You go from Romanoff, and then you follow her to Bruce.
Right, okay, so it's Bruce first. Recast, what do we think? This is Mark Ruffalo. First impressions, folks.
I think it's... I think it works. I think it's obviously it works, but I think it's quite smart casting because he's not, should we say, a big name, especially at that time. He was big enough to be cast, but not like, I'm going to outshine anyone, so it's going to look unhinged. So anyone who's coming into this thinking like, Wagon, where's Edward Norton? Who the fuck's this guy? He's quite good at sort of dissolving into the character. And he does.
He was known for more kind of like character, like drama, rom-coms, indie films, more character-driven pieces, wasn't he? Rather than big action heroes.
And he's always quite a calm performer. Like he's very much like a very, nothing big, nothing too grand, just very kind of, just smart, kind of, Yeah, just sort of very relaxed sort of tone, which kind of is a very good polar opposite to what Hulk is. You know, so when he's Bruce, he's very sort of calm and monotonic and kind of almost like sort of just thinking things through all the time until he rages into the Hulk. So it's just quite a good sort of balance between the two. So I can see Mark Ruffalo is quite really good casting for Banner.
I guess I knew him best from Eternal Sunshine.
Yeah, definitely.
And Zodiac. They were the two films that really sort of sprung to mind as
He was in Collateral as well.
Collateral, yeah, that's a really good film.
He was, but I mean, the names that spring to mind, those films I have to think about it. And where was he in that? Oh, yeah. Whereas those two films I mentioned were like, he springs to mind very quickly for them. I mean,
he was playing quite cerebral characters as well.
I was kind of happy with the casting. I really was, even in principle, before he turned up. And then as soon as he turned up, and he's got this sort of slightly awkward shuffle about him and a slight sort of shuffling gait to him, and he wears very slightly oversized clothes, which is probably a bit of a nod to what he becomes, but only very, very slightly. And he's a quiet, passive character, which is, I know, a theme of the sort of way I review actors and acting. But you know, that he is a passive cinematic presence, and I like that. He's got a very, very soft voice as well, and I like that. I think he's perfect. But he always gives a slightly quirky. I hate the word quirky because it almost comes off as an insult, and it comes off as almost describing something you don't quite understand. But you know, where he smacks the table and like scares her for a minute. That is Mark Ruffalo. Mark Ruffalo always seems to give a slightly offbeat take on things. So I was really, really happy with it. And I love this sequence. I really, really love this sequence. It's dripping with atmosphere and it's very well lit. The whole sequence in Calcutta and the houses he's going into and where she catches up with him. And she's terrified. And I love that about Scarlett Johansson. I'm not convinced. I was never convinced she was an amazing actress. And I think a lot of that is her voice is kind of flat. But she's always played Black Widow with an element of something going on under the surface, with the exception of Iron Man 2, where she is kind of a bit more of a wet dream in sort of conception. But ever since, there's always been something going on behind the eyes and something we don't know. So she's playing frightened sometimes, and it actually turns out she's not at all. And then when she's playing completely calm, there's actually really is some fear under the surface, and we see that here. Because she's got a plan. She's got a plan that she has to convince him that is going to work, and she's completely sure of. But at the same time, there's no fucking plan B. If Banner doesn't do what she wants, she doesn't know what to do next.
I mean, he kind of like tests her as well when he kind of shouts, and he just sort of gets the reaction of her.
Yeah.
Of like,
but then he smiles and sort of goes sorry, and he's got such a warm smile to him, and it's just like, yeah, I'm happy with this. And I think would Norton have worked? Yeah, Norton's a terrific actor. I've seen him in loads of things I've really enjoyed, and even in films I don't like Birdman. He was so good in Birdman after this film. So could it have been Mark Ruffalo? Could it have been him? Yes. And could it have been terrific with him? Yes. But if you offered me one or the other, I would take Ruffalo without question.
Yeah, it's always one of those sort of, I wonder what it will look like. But yeah, end day it works the way it is. Yeah.
And then the thing I saw, and then when I saw Stark first, because we go from that, and we go from that to Stark, who's basically putting the finishing touches to the sort of Stark building in New York, which is handy because he's in New York. But it's a completely clean energy building that's self-sufficient for a year off like an arc reactor. But the first thing I thought when I saw him and the music kicked in like Iron Man's music was I thought, oh, well, they sorted out his contract negotiations then.
They did, really easily.
Really nice, though. Even the building they're in, I think there's a lovely chemistry between him and Pepper. And the way they interact with Agent Coulson's really good as well.
Yeah, they got really good. Again, got really good chemistry with
really good
Paltrow.
rapport there. I love the backstory between them.
And I just love the line like, "Excuse me, his first name's Agent."
I think that's the best. Like
Phil,
I must say,
his
first name is Agent. I must say, although I'm not a big fan. I mean, I do like Iron Man, but of all the characters, he's not my favourite, unfortunately. A little bit lower down the rung, but he's still cool nonetheless.
That is unfortunate, Becca.
Very sad. I'm very sorry about that. I know there are a lot of fans out there. But he gets the best lines.
There'll be riots, Becca.
Riots in the streets.
I hope your conscience is clear that it'll be right.
Infamy. They've all got it, infamy. So yeah, but anyway, he has the best lines. He's like the Drax of this film. He has like the, I know it's really random Moonraker reference, but where Drax has all the best lines in Moonraker, Downey Jr. has all the best lines in this film. There are like 3 really good ones that are absolute howlers. And obviously the Hulk smash scene involving Hulk and Loki has me howling for end on end.
That's largely down to like 2 things. One, Downey is really good at delivering humorous lines. He's fabulous. He's very dry as well. But also, he's the biggest draw. He's like the most popular one, so he will probably
he's
get
like the backbone, really. So he just, I think Whedon has done really well in giving him what I deem to be the best lines in the film. So
that's all of those. So they're all together now, aren't they? Oh, the only other one is Cap.
Which is basically.
I like this sequence just because, again, it's shot through a slightly sort of sepia tint. So even though he's now got to exist in 2012 and exist with everyone else, when Fury goes to get him, he could be working out in like a 1940s
1940s, yeah. You never know.
I like that, and I'm not. Everything has been retconned now. I watched this film and I'm perfectly happy with Cap, but I wasn't really at the time. And actually, some of the dialogue he's forced to be given in this film, gives him Adrian from the Rocky films, kind of syndrome that you've just got him there having to moan and stuff. And we'll get to that a little bit later on. But now I look back on it, I like this and I like the dialogue. Trying to put me back in the world, trying to save it.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. I mean, it might sound a bit old-fashioned, but Cap's an old-fashioned guy. So
that's what we need, is a little bit of old-fashioned.
Yeah, well, basically, it just worked. I mean, I like the payoff line. When it goes into it, sort of like, it's not won by war's won by soldiers, and he just cut to Cap. That's a nice transition. And
as he's working out on the heavy bag, he's thinking about when he sort of dunked into the water as well, and Agent Carter.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whose first name is Agent.
Peggy, but never mind.
Yeah, Agent Peggy Carter. Peggy's not name.
Agent Margaret.
Because she's fond of pegging. It's a nickname.
Her name's actually Margaret, but never mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think Phil, his first name's Agent, is like one of the best lines in the whole film. So funny.
Delivered so well as well, because you can fuck that line up quite easily. So we've got them all together, and then we sort of cut in on Loki's plot, which he needs to basically. It's to do with when they power up the tesseract, they need to contain it. I think that's what it is. They need to steal.
Open up a portal, and they had a few lackeys who are not fond of Shield. Which is a nice quick way of just explaining, like, how can you get like a load of henchmen all of a sudden?
I was like, where did they come from? We haven't seen them before.
And I think that's just there to sort of say, they've just not just killed innocent people that he's brainwashed. He's just, they're actual bad guys that have just like sort of flocked to his help.
And they're obviously trying to find him, so they have managed to sort of track him to there. So he's there, and they take the eye out of the guy to break in to get this stuff. And then Cap turns up. Cap, you're up. So Cap turns up to fight him for a bit.
Yeah, in Berlin. So Loki's doing this whole whole kneel and like I'm here as your ruler. Isn't this easier? This whole theory of like. Your natural state is to be led like cattle. It's freedom is a big lie kind of thing.
Yeah. Now we know we can blame Agent Coulson for what's coming because they're flying Cap there, and Agent Coulson says he had some input into the new outfit, and I hate this fucking outfit they give Cap in this film. It's awful. I thought
that's a bit rude.
I genuinely started thinking, well, it's not that helmet, Becca. Don't worry. I wonder if he writes A on that as well. But yeah, he
the headwear that he wears,
I was a bit concerned at this point. I just thought, oh god, I don't want more Cap films. If he's going to look like that and be this fucking cheesy, I'm going to have to
change up the outfits every now and then. Obviously, we've got a new Iron Man.
Yeah, they change them every time.
Thor looks different. Cap looks different. Hulk's the only one to stay the same. That's it, I think.
Yeah, I mean
the other two don't really have. They have costumes. They have suits.
They change Black Widow's hair every time.
Oh yeah.
Basically, obviously, it's wigs, and
Yeah, it's different.
the Russos traditionally have put her in better wigs than Whedon ever did. But yeah, so we get the first bit of sort of Coulson's man crush on Cap.
Yeah, I think it's
which
really
is
funny.
great. Coulson is just so redeemed by this film. He's just great.
He really comes into his own here, I think.
I watched you while you were sleeping.
What's I mean? Yeah,
but it's the comic timing of Coulson saying it, and the actor Clark Gregg, like
saying with a straight face,
immediately pulling that slight face of, oh, that sounded creepy. I like that. It's really, really
and Chris
good.
Evans' reaction is priceless.
Yeah, it's just I don't know what to say to that.
He's like, thank you.
And it's like that. He says about the outfit, and he says, "Isn't that a old fashioned? With everything that's going on, we need a bit of that." So they fly him in to basically take on Loki immediately. So we get a bit of action there, and finally we can actually see a little bit of what the super soldier serum can do, which his own film didn't really show.
Which was that? Like, what did his own film didn't show?
Just the way the super soldier serum can allow a human being to move.
Oh, I see, like sort of flip around and things like that.
Yeah, a la Blonsky, basically. I think this film shows all that much, much better. It's a good sequence, and of course, I think just thematically, the first person you put up against Loki is going to be like the purest white hat of your team before you have to get into anything like shades of grey and nuclear bombs and all that shit. You know, immediately you send in your nicest man. I kind of like that. That feels right.
It's also fitting the fact that it's in Berlin as well. So he goes like, last time I was in Berlin.
yeah, definitely. And so yeah, you send in a guy who the last time he was awake was fighting, you know, that country effectively. But he's not quite enough. Loki's almost got the better of him, and then suddenly Shoot to Thrill kicks in.
It's a bit shoot to thrill.
Which I love. What an entrance that was. We have seen Iron Man in this film, but yeah, it was just what an entrance. He suddenly hacks into like Black Widow's system, and he's suddenly like, "Hi," you know.
I like how like Scarlett Johansson always has like a smile comes on her face, but almost like an eye roll at the same time.
Yeah, it's just like what an entrance. Yeah, it's just
you again.
Great. It's great, and he lands and immediately he's armed to fuck.
Yeah,
so basically,
he's so cool.
They spoil this at the same time. So then what do we have?
Oh, they basically find Loki and they're like flying back, and
Thor.
And yeah, they basically have Thor entrance. So they have Thunder. And
scared of Thunder. I'm not overly fond of what comes with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a bit kind of a bit weird, but yeah, I think that's a really cool introduction as well.
Yeah, so Thor comes down, which we don't know why, seen as...
Yeah, because there's no Bifrost anymore.
No, that's a bit weird. Obviously, he can't, you know, but obviously he's chasing off
the... So we'll
retcon
that.
Yeah, he kind of... Yeah, I would say that's probably one of the few weak points of the film. Very few, like, you can count them on one hand. But you just kind of, you gloss over it and think, well, he's got to come in somewhere, so it better be here, you know.
Well, I mean, the way they have to explain, like, Jane not being in it. Oh, we've got her somewhere safe.
We've got her stashed away safely.
She's not signing up for this. She's off doing, like, fucking...
Apparently she was pregnant at the time. That's why she was going to have a
cameo. Yeah, that's why she was having a baby. But it's like,
maybe she came back for the Dark World, but we know she's not fond of these films.
No.
She prefers to be pretentious with Aronofsky.
They can be pretentious together.
Yeah. So this actually leads to like a three-way confrontation between the three of them. Basically, you have Cap and Thor, and basically, Thor and Iron Man first, and then Cap jumps out of the plane after them, which is cool.
Yeah, I have a plan. Attack.
Yeah.
Also, Thor's eyebrows look better in this film.
Yeah, they haven't dyed his eyebrows this time.
I paid extensive attention to his eyebrows.
His hair's a bit longer as well, and it suits not necessarily Chris Hemsworth, but the Thor character.
It suits the character, which is why it's a major shock when he chops it all off.
Yeah, that's actors coming to the end of their contract where they're like, oh, I don't do that anymore. It's a bit like Jennifer Lawrence with the blue paint. Don't want to do it anymore.
Yes, yeah, it just changes it.
Or at least I perceive it is anyway. I mean, I know it kind of got explained away in plot, but I think Hemsworth pretty much said he didn't want to wear the wig anymore. But yeah, this is a good battle with some good lines as well. Doth mother know
you wear my drapes? Yeah. Third best line in the whole film.
She's ranked the lines, folks. We'll get to that later. This is all really good, and it actually tells you that in a fight they all pretty much stalemate each other.
Yeah, they're all going to be each other's equal, aren't they? Like, for example, there's a scene where basically Thor's hammer hits Cap's shield, and they just reverberations abound. And it's like, okay, these are, even though they are mighty in their various respects, they are all equals in terms of their superpowers, as it were.
And when they finish this, it's all like, are we done here?
Yeah,
they're all knackered. They've all fought themselves to a certain standstill. Yeah. They've all realised it's a bit pointless, and it's like,
no, right, this is a level playing field for us.
Are we done here?
Yeah, are we done now? This is it. But
so
yeah, it's all good.
No hard feelings. Got a mean swing Point Break. Yeah.
Yeah, so they take him back to.
Point Break. I love all the little references as well that he makes. It's very clever.
They take him back to what looks like basically an aircraft carrier, albeit a very large one. And there is a little bit of nerves around Banner, isn't there? You immediately, because he says, you want me on here, and it's like...
Yeah, in a kind of, a confined space.
We don't know yet what level of control he's got, if any. You've got Loki there, who we know can get up to all sorts. You've got Thor with his power. But I have to admit, when this helicarrier took off, that was pretty impressive at the time. Yeah. That you suddenly realise the scale of this operation, this organisation. Particularly later, as you find it isn't the only one in later films.
No.
But this is kind of impressive. So they're on this helicarrier that can kind of shield itself, no pun intended, up in the sky.
Yeah, and I wonder who's funding that.
Yeah, I wondered the same.
But yeah, it's a comic book movie. Who cares? So you have all your main players. You've got Cap, who is like, I also like the gag that goes away, gives Fury like the tenor. There you are.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're basically sort of like in a meeting and not quite clicking. Tony's walks in as if like he owns the place, essentially.
Yeah, which he may well do. When you talk about funding, there may well be.
Yeah, true.
I think he might have given the most amount of dollars.
That's probably a good point. Yeah.
He borders on Iron Man 2 territory, but he stays the right side of the line. He does. He stays the right side of the line. He's there with the best possible heart and for the best possible reasons. The problem is because
he's playing it cynical, isn't he? Which isn't completely unfounded.
Because he's such a sort of contrary character in his way. That leads Steve to have to be the sort of straight-laced one. And it doesn't help the character when we're still fairly new to him. We're still fairly new to Steve Rogers at this point. So when he's playing, you don't take anything seriously sort of attitude, it is, like I say, a bit like Adrian in Rocky, that she's saying everything you'd expect the character to say, but we as the audience don't necessarily want to be hearing that.
Yeah, he's like the moral compass almost, isn't he? He's like the straight arrow. Not that the others aren't particularly going off all directions, but he's like the kind of the one constant, as it were. But he does come out of his shell a little bit in preparation for the Winter Soldier.
It's almost as if we could have done with like another film before this to sell that.
Yes.
Sorry,
that's Chris reminding you of last week when he was right.
Chris is always right.
Yeah,
and so is Dave, so there we are.
Thank you. Even when we disagree, we're both right.
Yes.
Even when you are wrong, you are right.
Yeah. So where do we go from there? The group aren't kind of clicking. I also like there were some complaints at the time, but I still like the line where he says, he's still my brother. He killed so many people. He's adopted.
He's adopted?
Yeah, that got complaints at the time.
Why?
Well, it was just saying from like adopted people that.
Yeah, it was a bit. It struck a nerve with those who've been adopted, but.
I just think not adopted people. I mean, like people.
Take it for what it is. It's saying adopted people are lesser, are they?
Yeah, but that thing. So you think about the joke. That's not what it was. It was like him just like finding like the first thing you think of to separate himself quite from that. You know what I mean? That's all that was. It's not separated
at all. You see it in future films, and he very much sees Loki as his brother, and he's very hurt by what Loki is. Exactly. So I take it in context as what it is. At the time, where you don't have the time to sort of engage your moral compass and think about these things, just as a line, it was funny, and it was well delivered. And Hemsworth should be James Bond, and if not, James Bond.
Bloody hell! Yeah, James Bond for sure.
And if not, Mike Hunt.
In terms of like the differences between them, for example, as well, like the first film, he calls him brother many times, but it's like Loki is the one who calls out those differences. It's literally like he's like, I'm not the same as you.
They've treated him as family. It's Loki who continually points out he's
exactly. He always points out that he's the other in this play.
So yeah, I try to be respectful of complaints, and I can imagine that if you are adopted, you might look at that in a certain way. I can't look at it in that way because I'm not, so I just looked at it as a funny line, and I thought it was very funny. And well delivered. Chris Hemsworth is brilliant in this.
Great comic timing.
Yeah. They clearly are quite pissy with each other, and it's something coming from that staff, isn't it? It's something coming from the gem in the staff. Because Steve and Tony are really aggressive with each other. Bruce is starting to get a bit funny to the point that he actually picks up the staff at one point.
I think it's the effects of the tesseract kind of impeding upon them.
It's
That's
not the
that's kind of
tesseract, it's the gem.
not
the
the tesseract, the gem. Sorry, even.
Well, you have Tony putting like the bug that hacks into like the system because he doesn't trust Fury that well. I think he's hiding something, and they have him and Stark and Rogers have a bit of a hash out. Basically,
that's the point. Stark is hacking in because something's being hidden, and Steve is very much you can't do that. And as an audience, it's like no, we want to know what's being hidden. So it plays against Steve's bond with the audience. That's all I'm saying. As we go forward, and Stark is proven correct, and Steve is rightly angry with S.H.I.E.L.D., who've pulled him out of deep sleep to work for them, and it's like, is this the sort of organisation you are? Then it starts bringing Steve back on side. But he's still a relatively new character to us, is all I'm saying. But of course, we do eventually get an explosion, don't we?
Yeah.
Or have we got the whole Loki and Coulson stuff first?
Well, we have Black Widow with Loki interrogation bit.
And playing really hurt. Yeah, again, playing really damaged and pained.
And we all assumed that like there was a romance with Romanoff and Hawkeye.
I never read it that way, because Hawkeye's been married for years.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we didn't know that in the film, though.
We didn't know that at this stage, no.
No.
Yeah, they're kind of like the two unknowns almost, aren't they? Well, not unknowns, but kind of...
In this, they're not established.
We didn't know at this stage he was doing Velma from the Mystery Gang.
Oh, ScarJo.
Yeah, when she says like, "Oh, love is for children," you think, yeah, just saying that, aren't you? You know.
Yeah.
But obviously, she must mean it at the time. And yeah, so she does that. She figures out that his plays Hulk, which doesn't help because it's too late by that time. Yeah.
Coulson is after the attack. Sorry, so there's an explosion, and Banner hulks out. Now, this is really efficient storytelling because we find out later that basically, if he controls the Hulk out, he controls the Hulk. Mm-hmm. And at this point, he doesn't control the Hulk out, so he's absolutely mindless violence at this stage. And we're left in no doubt he would have killed or badly hurt Black Widow had he got to her.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally, had she not managed to get away in time, that would have been the
brave.
end of her.
Bear in mind, this is a new Hulk. It's the same Hulk, but it's a new design and a new banner.
Same Hulk, but different.
It's like being introduced to a new character almost. And the first we see of him, we've always believed, right the way back to the like Lou Ferrigno Hulk and the comic books and all the rest of it, that Hulk deep down won't hurt anyone. He's mindless and he's violent, but he wouldn't hurt anyone. This Hulk would have killed her, I believe. The film is telling us he would have, and it takes Thor's interjection to stop it.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense for that character as well. I mean, there was talk in the before that with Banner and Stark about what the Hulk actually is, and he treats it like a curse. It's like, no, you need to look at it differently. Treat it as a gift.
It's storytelling for the Avengers, because later on, when Tony's saying, "Tell him to suit up," that is a sign of trust between a team. That is, no, I can see this man. I've bonded with this man. I can see this man's mind. He can control this thing. I'm convinced he can control it and aim it as a weapon. And actually, that's trust that the audience buys into when all we've actually seen is a mindless killer Hulk. That's
that Tony, and the promotion as well.
That's Tony seeing Bruce. That's Tony seeing Bruce and what's within the Hulk, if you like, or what he's got within him, whichever way you want to look at it. As an audience, all we've seen of the Hulk at this stage is mindless and actually deeply dangerous. The fight with Thor is really cool.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the stuff with the hammer. I thought that's kind of cool.
Well, the very first shot is he just swings his hammer at him, and then it goes slow motion, which I don't normally like, but it works here.
Yeah, because it's not often you see someone just like knock the Hulk completely off his feet, so it's like a whoa.
Yeah, and then Hulk's like gets the hammer thrown at him, and then he's kind of dragged along the floor by it, and he tries to pick it up and can't. It's really great. This is good stuff, and it really hits home how strong Thor is. Because what we've seen in fight in the first film, we had no frame of reference for the power of that thing. We know how strong the Hulk is. You know, Thor is in kind of a vaguely human body. For him to be able to go one-on-one with the Hulk is very impressive. And it's a good sequence. It's kind of got a sort of wit to the action. It's good.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's damaged one of the engines, so you've got Cap and Iron Man out trying to fix that.
Yeah.
That all feels a bit like busy work, but it needs to be done. They have to draw the Hulk away from it, so basically he jumps out onto a plane, doesn't he, that's there to attack him.
Kind of also it brings the character of Cap to kind of bring him up to modern technology as well, because he sort of looks at the parts and he's kind of like,
This
well,
looks like it works on,
and he's like, you're not wrong. So again, that kind of, because another thing through obviously Cap's storyline is kind of like basically a list of things in the 20th century onwards, in the 21st century, that he has to sort of come to terms with and learn about, really. So, but yeah, I think that's quite interesting. You sow the seeds of that there, which is quite good.
They don't show you the first time he finds Pornhub, do they?
First time he discovers...
Fucking hell! Language. Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah. So...
I mean, well, it's one of the things I did wonder, like, what is Tony's beef with Cap? 'Cause he just seems to take against him, like, for reasons like that's not entirely established.
It's not really established. I think I've always read it is he doesn't trust Shield when the download's complete and it finds out they're using all this technology to create weapon. He doesn't trust Shield and he sees Cap as a mascot of Shield.
Yeah, he's a major proponent, really, isn't he? So that's where the distrust comes from.
It was before that though, a little bit. You know, oh, actually no, maybe not, because he was like, you know. I'm thinking of the conversation with Banner saying, like, really, is that the guy my dad banged on about?
I don't think it's always that way round. I think it's more the fact that
they're opposites.
Cap is not impressed by him. He finds him flippant. You know, don't forget he's just been working with like soldiers and you know, the quote unquote finest generation.
And to work with somebody who's got a big ego as well.
He comes in with this guy, and it's all fucking ego.
Yeah.
And he's there kind of like. And he's trying to taunt Bruce. Now, in his mind, he's in no danger at all. He's having fun with Bruce. But Cap's there going, that's fucking dangerous. We're on this craft. If that thing gets out, the Hulk, we're in trouble. You know, he's not going to trust Hulk either, because he would see it as a bastardization of the super soldier serum he was given. He's already seen with the Red Skull what a bad version of the serum can do. And you've got Tony there, like giving him electric shocks and things like that, taunting him, and that's what it is. Cap is pissed off with him. I think Cap is who actually gets Tony's back up, not the other way. Or put it this way: Tony is pissed. Cap is pissed off with Tony, and speaking out gets Tony to take against Cap. That's the way round it is.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, I think it's like personality clashes as well, isn't it? Because I think one of the things I did notice, and I think it's arcs back to I think the one who Tony is the one who has the biggest character arc in the film, and that's largely down to his interaction with Cap. It's not as well established in it, but it is there, because when he has when he does the whole there's nothing. There's nothing special about you that came out of a bottle, and it's like sort of take that suit off, what you got, you know, that kind of thing. That does resonate with Tony, even though he doesn't like want to show it. He goes straight on the defense, but you can see in Downey Jr.'s like expression that he's kind of like touched a nerve there, and I think.
That's where team-up films can't quite go. You know, we're saying it's hinted at there, and it's sort of hinted at there, and that's not quite properly established. The film does everything it needs to do to tell us, but obviously those are the limitations of the team-up films. They have to get a lot of information across quite quickly. Yeah. They do it very well, but it is a natural Cap, again, no pun intended, on the fidelity of these films, the absolute quality of these films is just a little bit compromised by the fact that they've got to serve a lot of people, and it's only going to get worse than this. But they've done a terrific job. They have done. But yeah, we could do with establishing their beef a lot better. We really could. But we do get that they don't like each other, and they're fundamentally characterized well enough that actually you would look at them and go, yeah, those two wouldn't like each other.
Yeah.
Don't forget as well, he wasn't the biggest fan of Howard Stark, his dad, because he saw Howard Stark flirting with Peggy.
True.
And Peggy had to say, we're lucky to have him and all the rest of it. And then he meets his son, who's in his mind a bit of an asshole as well, and he's like chip off the old block. His father was a dick as well.
Yeah, very true.
That explains the
So it's all there, but there's only so much of it that they can make explicit. A lot of it's implicit from what we've seen in other films and what we can just see in the characters. Absolutely. So that actually sort of splits them, doesn't it? Because you've got the Hulk has sort of jumped off the ship to sort of jump on that plane and ends up falling from it. Cap and Tony are still on the ship, but they've just basically fixed it to stop it falling. Thor has been tricked into the sort of containment cell by Loki and dropped out. And that's
Romanoff and Hawkeye have a fight, and he gets knocked in the head and put
that
back
seems
to
to bring him round, because that's all you got to do. Major brain trauma sorts it out. But that's okay.
Was that hit you really hard on the head?
That's okay. That's actually brought him into the film, and we're deep enough.
Smack yourself out of it.
If you'd had him as him at the start of the film, you probably would have had to put a lot more to the character work. But now we're at crisis stations. He's brought back. Black Widow knows him, so that's clearly she's like her sponsor to the audience. I sponsor him. You can watch this guy. We don't need to know much about him. He's with me, sort of thing.
He's good with arrows.
Yeah, and that's all we need to know, really. So he's now back and sort of sane. Selvig isn't at this stage, I don't think.
No.
So, yeah, so what have we got? We've got Loki still on the ship. Thor's been sort of ejected. The Hulk's been ejected.
Coulson gets killed.
And Coulson goes in to talk to Loki and ends up...
that's before he sends Thor on...
That's before he sends Thor, but Hulk's gone.
I've got a not-so-fun fact about that at the end of the show.
I bet it's fun, really. All your facts are fun. You make them fun.
It's a bit grisly, but yeah.
You bring the joy.
IMDb brings the facts, Becca brings the fun.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, actually, it's all from my own knowledge.
It's like alcohol. She takes base metals and turns them into gold, Chris. So, where do we go from there?
That's
The killing of Coulson, Loki goes in. I'm not quite sure why Coulson goes in, but he goes in to talk to Loki for some reason, gives it some stuff about you won't win, and then Loki appears behind him and stabs right through him. That didn't, but Christ, you're so wimp. You're such a wimp, Becca. PG-13.
That's why my fact is is quite, because it's quite a gory scene, but
it's not. They cut it out, really.
It's PG-13.
Well, not in all versions of the film. Some versions they kept it in.
Becca, I think both of us have like different opinions of what gory is.
We see a lot of blood, which is unusual for a Disney film.
That's not.
But also, we haven't mentioned the Q word.
Oh,
the insult, which caused so much consternation back in 2012 when the film was released.
I was amazed that got past our censors. I wasn't surprised it got past the MPAA because they wouldn't know what it meant.
Well, it's very old-fashioned, isn't it?
Well, yeah, he calls Black Widow a mewling quim.
That's going to slap us right 18 rating.
Quim is a vagina, folks.
It's a really, really old word, like Shakespearean.
So, yeah.
And everyone was like, what does that word mean?
Mewling would be kind of whining, wouldn't it? He calls her a whining cunt.
I think it's like weeping or something like that. I know.
Sorry to use that language, but that's what he's called her. In modern parlance, he's called her a whining cunt.
He's basically called her the C word.
Yeah, that's what he's called her, and it got past both sets of censors, no problems at all.
Because it's a very oldie, worldy word, so...
Yeah.
So well done.
Mind you, some language does change over time. It's like the British insult, Burke. That's the same word because it's rhyming slang. Berkshire Hunt.
Yeah, literally.
I had no idea, but
it's rhyming slang, isn't it?
It's rhyming slang. So if you call someone a Burke, you're calling them that.
See, it's just really weird, isn't it? Like, because every day when you think of like offensive words, you think, yeah, but they're just words. Like,
it's all the way imbue.
Like, it's like it's like, you say.
Well, I remember having this conversation with my dad
if I
once.
nudge Dave, saying like, "Oh, come on, you pussy," that does not have the same effect. If I just call, "Oh, come on, you cunt," it's.
Well, I remember saying to my dad once, right? I said, like, if it offends people, I get it, and I've been blocked for using that word before on like social media and stuff, so I get it, and I tried to use it a bit less. But I remember saying to my dad, just playing devil's advocate, why is the C word offensive? And he said, because it's a woman's private part. And I said, but you'd have no problem calling someone a dick.
Mm.
I don't really get it myself.
Yeah, all swear words are like basically either feces, sex, or genitalia. They are basically what swear words are. Yeah,
I know. But anyway, so
and it's weird how we like think, oh my god, offensive.
The Avengers got away with using a variant on the C word effectively, and I'm not sure everyone who watched it knows that even to this day, because they would have heard that and thought it was some old Shakespearean thing or something. Because Branagh did the Thor film, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But so Thor, there's a point about Thor in a minute, but Thor is obviously ejected. Coulson is killed. You've got Cap left with Black Widow and Iron Man, and I think Hawkeye is still there as well. And they basically get shown the bloodied Cap cards because he was collecting they're kind of like baseball cards, aren't they? Really? Mm. Yeah.
And. Yeah, and he sort of gives his speech, and he gives. I've forgotten what the word is. It stuck out on this viewing. Well, like Stark does stand up and walk out when he mentions like something. So basically, something to do like hero or something like that.
Yeah.
And he's always just like, I can't listen to this, or something about, which I think was again it's part of his arc. But it gets
for all his arrogance, he's not sure he belongs there.
Yeah, or maybe sort of like.
I think that carries over into Iron Man 3. I think there's a bit of Tony that's never quite sure he's up to it.
Yeah, like it's almost just like the
higher calling. It's the higher calling. He can do all the stuff in the suit, but can he be a better man?
Yeah, it's almost if it's like sort of the Macbeth thing of like washing the blood off your hands. It's like it's never clean,
Well, I think also it's the fact that like. That's probably half the reason he is ridiculing like Steve Rogers and that, because actually deep down he probably thinks Steve Rogers is a bit better than him.
Yeah.
And the best way to sort of level that in your mind is to sort of start downplaying how good the other person is and tearing them down a bit. Mm. Yeah, absolutely. What makes me laugh about all of this now is so they're sort of spurred into action by the death of Coulson, but you've got. Banner lands and obviously becomes Banner again, and Harry Dean Stanton, the late Harry Dean Stanton, now helps him.
Very sad.
But Thor stands in that field looking at his hammer for hours. You ever noticed?
It's a very long time, isn't it?
He's looking at it, and then hours go by while they fly somewhere, and when it cuts back to him, he's still stood there staring at it. It's just one of those things I noticed on first viewing. I was like, hang on a minute, Thor has been stood there staring at his hammer on the ground in a field for about 5 hours at least.
Very thoughtful.
Yeah, very thoughtful. Really thinking about that hammer. So we obviously we must head for New York now.
Yeah. I mean, we get the reveal that like
because
Fury planted the cards. Like he wasn't. Coulson didn't have the cards on him.
No, he didn't. It was in his locker.
Yeah.
Rhea Hill tells him that.
From a storytelling perspective, I wonder why. Why can't it just be? Why do you have to add the thing that like? Fury lied. What difference does that make?
I think that I wonder if that's a bit of seeding, because if you remember, Joss Whedon had an oversight through the whole of Phase 2, and he even helped to rewrite certain things and advised on certain things and checked for tone and stuff like that. Nick Fury is deeply distrusted by Cap in The Winter Soldier.
Oh, okay.
You have to see that like he's not entirely ever quite dealing you a full deck. He's never quite telling you the truth. I think
he's keeping some cards very close to his chest.
Yeah, he'll do what's necessary, and it won't always be completely ethical. And then you as a viewer have to make the decision on whether the ends justify the means. I think that's what it is anyway.
Okay.
I might be wrong on that. It might just have been a bit of extra pissing about as a character quirk. I don't know, but that's how I see it. Because when we get to the Winter Soldier, there's a deep distrust through the whole film, actually, because it's a 70s conspiracy thriller in the Marvel universe. So what do we got then? They have to work out that the only power source they could use would have to be a certain thing. They work out it's likely to be the Stark building.
Yeah.
So they head there, which seems a bit convenient that they work it out that easily. But yes, it's the Stark building.
It's a nice payoff though. It's like, it's Diva. It's opening night. He wants to be there with his name shining. Oh,
how did Loki get off the craft? I can't remember.
Oh, he just got picked up by one of the plane type things.
Okay.
By the other bad guy, because they got attacked. They got attacked by a ship that Hawkeye was on, didn't they? So I think that ship just picked them up. Right,
gotcha. Oh yeah, I remember that now. I remember that because I remember Hawkeye firing because he causes the explosion. Yeah. Okay, I've got it. Yeah. Okay, I'd forgotten that. So they get the tesseract and open a wormhole into space. Now, normally I'd hate this. The blue beam up to the sky again.
But did this start the trope, though?
I think I have a feeling we've saw it before this. I don't know. You might be right. Maybe it was just in 3 or 4
It may
films
be because we've seen it so many times since that it just feels like...
Might be. I always thought the whole Chitauri thing... Obviously not very good at pronouncing that.
Yeah, we can't manage to do it, can we?
Calamari.
It seems...
Calamari.
Yeah.
Very delicious. Especially...
Yeah, that
bit chewy.
It seemed a convenient villain. It just did. It's the one thing about this film that it is a bit by committee. But what's coming now is terrific. They open this wormhole to another space, basically. And when you think about some of the powers Thanos will later have, you can see, some of those powers here. That it's basically the space gem. And so the Chitauri come through and start attacking.
Yeah, and Cap's first on call. Not Cap, sorry. Stark is first on call.
Stark's there. It lands on his building and basically walks in. His armor's fucked, and he basically makes him a drink.
Yeah,
and we get the famous "We have a Hulk" line, which has obviously been reused ever since.
That's the third. Yeah. Actually, my previous favourite line was the second best line in the film. Does mother know you wear thy drapes?
Yeah.
You wear her drapes even. And then number 3, we have a Hulk is the best line in the film.
Cool. All right. So there's a conversation here, and it's all willy waving basically. But he's about to be killed by.
Oh,
Loki.
I came here to threaten you.
Yeah. I love the fact Stark gets knocked out of the building, and basically the armor forms around him, the Mark 7.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I do like that scene a lot.
I wish the armor had never gone much further than this because I don't like the way it is now. I quite like the fact he can call it to him. I do like that.
And obviously, that's really cool. But you've got to show improvement, haven't you, as well? Because over the last few films, we've seen the fact that he's tirelessly trying to work it and improve it and make it better. And now we've kind of seen it. It's pretty smooth the way it is at the moment, where you can kind of call it to him.
I don't really like the look of it. I'll talk about that when we get to Infinity War because I think they've gone a step too far. It's a bit Green Lantern-y in its skill set now.
Yeah, it does look a bit too smooth.
And it doesn't look right. It's all a bit too smooth, and it's not. Yeah, I don't really like it because the armor gets damaged and immediately repairs itself. I used to like it when he had the scratches of battle on him. Again, I don't care what's in the comic books. It's a different medium, and I'm not convinced it particularly works in films. Of course, in the next film, he's experimenting with calling the bits to him and all the rest of it.
Humanize him a little bit as well, because he's very much like a man inside machine, as it were. But here it's kind of fusing the two together.
Problems with Iron Man 3 and what it tells us about his interaction with the armor and how important it is or isn't. I liked it when it got this far. I like the fact that he can call it to him. I even like the Hulkbuster and all the rest of it later on. I like this scene. I like the fact he's basically out the window and the armor just about forms around him in time. And as much as you know it's going to, it's actually staged so perfectly that it's right at the last second. It's really good.
Very cool.
Yeah, and then we get, but it's basically the Battle of New York. There isn't really much to talk about other than the big action set piece, really. I mean, like, we have...
It's a very messy battle.
I think I only really want to point to a few things. I think we need to talk about the Hulk.
Yes, that's another best scene in the film.
We need to talk about the Hulk. Firstly, they merged the sort of better bits of the previous Hulk films in the Ang Lee film, he could leap like 3 miles at a go. And whilst I think that's probably a bit much, the fact that the Hulk can leap big distances here is actually a good thing.
Leap tall buildings in a single
I love the look of him because he looks like Mark Ruffalo hulked out. He does. But also the "I'm always angry" line just explains the fact that, like, basically I've got this thing under control.
He's got it on tap.
Although I wish he changed slower, just generally in life. I don't like the fact he goes bang Hulk now. I always liked that, fighting it and stuff. But anyway, that's
I think also that's quite an interesting contrast to Ragnarok as well, where he's basically given the choice, but he does lose that ability, he can't turn it off and turn it on again.
Yeah.
As we see in Infinity War. And also in Ragnarok as well, where he's given the choice, one or the other, and obviously at the end of that film, he makes his choice.
See, in Ragnarok, I'm actually not convinced he's as well animated, and it's probably because there's so much of him.
There's a lot going on
in
with
a
that
Thor
film.
Well, I think it's not quite as good. I think there was an improvement arc after this. Age of Ultron was a bit rushed, so there's a few shots in that I remember him not looking quite as good. Generally, the Hulk looks great, but yeah, he's really great here, and they just use him perfectly. He just goes rampaging through buildings and stuff like that. It's really great. The one shot, I think the two things I want to refer to is Hulk and Thor fighting together, and then him punching Thor at the end. Because an animator,
that was great. That was so funny.
Apparently, an animator put that in as a joke, and they liked it and finished it and kept it.
Yeah, fabulous. I think that's
It's almost like Hulk. He's still in control of the Hulk. The Hulk is kind of like, about that fight.
Yeah, about that
he's
fight
gonna,
earlier. And there's just a momentary beat where he stands there, and again, Chris Hemsworth, effortlessly charming, bit of a smile on his face, and then just twatted. I love that.
No, I remember seeing that in the cinema, and that got that, and We Have the Hulk has got the biggest single laugh of the whole.
I think the biggest Hulk laugh smashes Loki got the biggest laugh. I think.
Oh yeah,
that
one as well. That was the two high points for my audience.
There was only a couple of other things I wanted to mention. I think firstly, when they said call it Cap, I was a bit surprised. I didn't think we'd established Cap as the leader at that stage. And again, but it does speak now to Tony quite not necessarily thinking he's good enough. But I also wanted to mention the Loki smashdown, because that got such a fucking big laugh.
Yeah,
I am
really
a god, puny god. And I also love that scene. You start with, I can't remember which way it is. You start with, let me get this right. I think it might be Cap hurling Black Widow up onto something. Does she fly past Hawkeye firing something, and then
he's firing arrows, isn't he?
And then we move forward to the Hulk and so on, and basically we see all of them in one continuous camera shot doing stuff, and then
the money shot.
Pass and does something. It's wonderful, and I actually wish I'd just watched that one scene before we recorded, so I could.
It's amazing. Well, that tells you everything to know. By that point, they're all fragmented, and now they've come together as one cohesive team, and they're gonna.
I was worried about it being a disjointed mess, and that one shot is. No,
tells you it's not a disjointed mess. It's actually all right.
Yeah. The other thing I think worth mentioning about the Battle of New York is they once calculated the damage at 160 billion. If that was really New York.
Oh God. That's why they have to sign the accords in later films.
$160 billion worth of damage done to New York in that. So, do we want to say?
There was one of the other. Was it one of the Transformers films as well? They basically Chicago's razed, and that kind of came to a similar figure. I think, oh bloody hell, really?
They haven't calculated the damage that those films have done to our IQs.
Well, this is it precisely.
That's
Jesus.
priceless.
Yeah, can't put a price on stupidity, can you?
So I guess the next thing is obviously Fury superiors are basically saying we need to end this. If we don't stop this invasion now,
their answer is nuke it.
Nuke it. Manhattan, which has got how many million people in it? So they fire the nuke. Fury manages to stop one, but not the second, and Stark intercepts it. And this is his arc, really, isn't it?
Yeah, he
intercepts the missile, takes it through the wormhole. There is absolutely no guarantee he will get back.
And he takes out basically the Chitauri base ship or whatever.
The bit that doesn't make sense here is they're not robots. How come they're all dead the moment this thing?
Convenience. I don't know. I don't know. It's
like the droids in episode 1.
I'm no comic book expert, so maybe fans who know the stuff about them in the comics go, oh yeah, well that's a thing with them. They take out the base and they all got switch off or whatever.
Yeah, it's like a hive mind or something. Could be a hive mind or something. Didn't make sense in the concept of the film. But having said that, I didn't notice it on first viewing. On first viewing, I was so caught up in it. I was like, thank God. But then when I watched it again, I was like, hang on a minute. They're flesh and blood of a type. How's that happened?
Yeah.
But yeah, Stark's suit runs out of power and he's basically stuck. He manages to fall through the wormhole just as Romanoff closes it, basically.
Yeah.
And the Hulk catches him, and that's a wonderful moment when the Hulk catches him. And this
That's
is what I was
brilliant. I
saying.
love that scene.
This is what I was saying about the universe, that it has managed to like up the stakes slowly, so you buy it. If Stark had taken a hit like that in the first film, you'd have gone fucking hell. Because obviously it's a bit like Superman catching Lois. In reality, it would have broken every bone in his fucking body. But the hits have been sort of exaggerated over time slowly, that we buy all this. The Marvel Universe has just expanded so sensibly. So they've won, basically. Thor's got Loki. Hulk has saved Banner. Hulk has saved Banner. Hulk has saved Tony. Yells at him, and Tony wakes up talking about shawarma.
and then they all got one last bit of business, and you have that they're all like pointing their, should we say, weapons at Loki.
Yeah, which is a bit.
And if it's all the same,
which is a little bit. That reminds me of the end of X2, when they're suddenly in the president's, when they're in the Oval Office and that they're suddenly all there at the same time. It's really cool. I really like that. Thor takes home Loki and the Tesseract, and basically we get a bit of a speech from Fury about they'll come back if they're ever needed, and we also see the people of New York responding. They get a bit of a hero's welcome. I felt like we got like a Bloodshot version of that with Thanos at the end of Infinity War. We get the moment where they've won, bit like the end of Ocean's 11, where they walk out and just look at the fountain and they're like,
cheers.
We've won.
I think maybe that's a reference to Ocean's 11, perhaps. I got that vibe as well.
It's possible. That moment of enjoying their moment of triumph.
Yeah, moment in the sun, definitely. And you got the Stanley cameo as well. As like, superheroes in New York, give me a break.
And you've also got, like Mark Ruffalo and sort of Robert Downey Jr. heading off together, like they're
science.
A new bromance.
Yeah, bromance to do science.
Yeah.
I think the whole thing with it, because I think the set piece in New York is always been like an anchor event thing, isn't it? It's always like be done as like a 9/11 type thing. But I think the difference with this in the universe, that because of the Avengers, there was like an element of hope with it. So even though it had like this really horrible thing happen,
and it is a bit of a movie cliche as well about the resilience of New York. That's been there since at least 9/11. We saw it in a couple of the Spider-Man films to varying qualities. And there's a little bit of this city never knows when it's beaten sort of thing.
Yeah,
it's a staple of superhero films as well, and also action films, and obviously especially since 9/11 for sure. Just goes to show that, especially because Obama had just been, he was voted into his second term.
Later this year, when they were filming, he would have been just past. When he was writing it, he would have been like mid-term in his first term. To be fair. Yeah,
definitely. But he had sort of the elections around that sort of time in 2012. I was just kind of looking at the events of that year. Definitely, a lot of political upheaval. And again, high on his agenda was national security. Can't speak now. National security, and of course that year as well, you had the Sandy Hook shooting. Unfortunately, very sad. So in terms of protecting like America and its turf. Having this range of very American superheroes protecting you,
but it was feel
very
good,
important.
and I think that's why it changes the whole landscape. In that, detractors will say, "Oh, it's all light and jokes and all the rest of it," and actually, it's not. It's a balanced tone, but it's a tone rooted in hope and goodness, in a way that like the Nolan Batman films arguably weren't. I love the Nolan Batman films, or I love two of them anyway, and I have a fair amount of respect for the third. But, that film, The Dark Knight Rises, was just a film ripped from its time. It was appropriate for 2008. It wasn't really appropriate this year. The Avengers was what the public warmed to. The Avengers was what the public wanted, and my boy did they land it. And even like the credit sequence at the end with that music and all their sort of the shield and the glasses and all the rest of it, just pitch perfect.
Yeah, I don't think this film did much wrong at all, to be
honest. There's very few times where they did put a foot wrong.
So yeah, I guess that's it really. I mean, the frustrating thing is just from a perspective. I mean, we're not going to do it as a commentary, spoiler alert, because I'll announce the commentary in a minute. But it's not going to be the Avengers. It very rarely is the last film before a commentary, because you don't want to do it 2 weeks in a row. So it was never likely to be the Avengers. But I probably would need a commentary to explain why Act 3 is so good. when you're actually sitting and trying to critique a film, it's a load of action. So what can we really say about it? But those few beats were worth commenting on, and I think the film left us all feeling really good. But how did we feel overall? Final thoughts, folks?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically what you have is like a 40-minute action scene, and it's just a collection of just like joyous moments that make you go, oh yeah, that was really cool, or that was really fun, or that was hilarious in some cases. So, and yeah, I just, you know, it's a film that you spend most of the time just sort of like just happy you're watching it. It just makes you feel like, oh, I never thought I'd get to see something like this, and I'm really happy that not only does it exist, that it's actually really good and really fun and entertaining. So, yeah, I don't think there's really much I can say other than that. I think it does.
I think it doesn't do it. It's not doing it a disservice to say we'll probably have more to say about some of the later films.
Yeah,
because there's more thematic work in it and stuff like that. Maybe certainly something like Civil War, but that's not doing this film down, is it? Really, that's just saying it's there to do something different. Because
I can't see, you know, I can't see that working with it when you have a collective set like an ensemble film, should we say? It needs to be along these lines. It needs to be a big party hoo-ha, you know. I mean, maybe later on with like films like Infinity War, you up the stakes and there are other things involved. But then
and you build on so many films as well.
Exactly. So, especially with the first team build-up, team films, this is exactly what it needs to be. This was just very fun, very funny. And yeah, just knew exactly when to hit the right beats at the right time. Yeah, pretty much bang on. I think there's a certain art to it which I cannot deny. So this is high end Marvel. I think it's probably still top end, top 5, definitely.
Yeah, just echo all the above, really. As we said at the beginning of the show, this has kind of brought all the the strands, can we say, throughout, brought it all together. It's literally like peak Marvel for 2012, definitely. I think had it literally just changed not only the superhero landscape, also the cinematic landscape. All the kind of, as Dave mentioned earlier on the show, there are some effects that kind of are looking a little bit ropey now, but very minor. All the kind of the weak points of the film you can count like on one hand. It's very action heavy, very funny, but I say we do as a character, as an ensemble piece, it works really well. All credit to Joss Whedon and Zach Penn as well. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and without doubt, certainly one of my film highlights of 2012.
For me, I echo what Chris says about ranking its top 5. I'm not going to say much more than that at the moment. I'd be surprised. I mean, we've got to rewatch them all, and like I say, one of the things I can do fairly well is rewatch fresh. So there's every chance that things that maybe in my skeleton ranking are below it might come and beat it, but I don't think so. I don't think at the moment there's an awful lot of chance that it will drop out of the top 5. Where it falls in the top 5 is up for debate. I think there are more thematically rich films in this series than this, but what there isn't is a film that is such a fucking celebration of what this medium is and what it can be. And that's what we clearly wanted in 2012, and I think it's one of the reasons that the sort of Nolan take on a sort of Batman is a little bit out of vogue now. It's not that it wasn't right for its time, and it's not that they weren't terrific films, but the world was ready for this. There was a lot on this. I think we look at it now as an unparalleled success, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Phase 1 was a bit ropey. It was, but they signed off in style, and they haven't looked back. There have been a couple of films since that I don't love, but not that many. Most of them since have been really, really good, solid entertainment that I think I would be ranking fairly high. So, highest of high praise for this. I haven't really got a lot more to say than that, to be honest. It's not the richest film in terms of trying to dissect, but it's a wonderful, wonderful celebration and a wonderful avatar for the series as a whole, if you like. And what it doesn't have that some of the later films have is this horrible, overstuffed nature. So pitch perfect, wonderful piece of work. But wonderful though it is, I don't know about you, Chris, but I'm feeling very underinformed.
I think I need some facts to assemble.
But Can facts be assembled in this way and still retain their fun edge?
I don't know. Shall we find out?
Let's.
Here we go with some fun facts about the Avengers.
Hey, that's fucking coincidence, isn't it, Chris?
Here we go with
relieved.
somebody who's going to go topics. Try to do my impression there of a dodgy narrator that nobody will know about. So yes, the Avengers ran in the UK for one series between 1961 and 1969, and Series 2, The New Avengers, from 1976 to 1977. The first two series weren't broadcast in America, mainly due to its violence, and was something that harmed its popularity across the pond. Fun fact number 3, The New Avengers came
Hang
about
on a minute.
through the...
Hang on a minute. Do we want to explain what we're fucking talking about?
No, okay, so unfortunately in the UK, over here, the film was called Avengers Assemble, much to Dave's chagrin, because of
Much
a
to
TV
everybody's
series in the
chagrin.
60s and
Idiotic.
70s. Exactly, and yeah, it's annoying. Called
Starring
The
Patrick
Avengers.
Uni.
Patrick Newny, Patrick McNee, Diana Rigg, and later on,
Joanna Lumley and Gareth
Honor
Knox.
Blackman,
As
whose
per-
name I
Honor
forgot.
Blackman was in it first, yeah. Honor Blackman
Yeah,
was
whose
in
name
it.
I forgot.
I've forgotten what her character was called. Kathy Gale, wasn't it?
That's,
Honor
yeah,
Blackman.
that's the one.
She went off to do Goldfinger and was replaced by Diana Rigg as Emma Peel.
Indeed.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is why I'm doing some fun facts about the Avengers. Anyway, the New Avengers came about through the popularity of the Tower King episodes in France, which led to a TV advert for Laurent Perrier, in which Linda Thorson and Patrick McNee reprised their roles, and the funding from the second series. A film version was in initial production, but obviously before the ball got rolling, Honor Blackman got the call from Eon to say, Miss Galore, and so she had to leave the series. And fun fact number 5, I might have revealed this in Our Majesty's episode, but I can't remember. Apparently Diana Rigg is one of the first British actors to practice Kung Fu on British TV, which I find mind-boggling, but very, very cool. And she trained it by the series stuntman Ray Austin.
Basically, in the Austin Powers films, Mrs. Kensington is basically...
She's meant to be Diana Rigg, isn't she? Pretty
Because he used to refer to it as Mrs. Peel. She was married.
Yeah, she was Emma Peel,
Yeah.
and she did have M Appeal, which is man appeal.
M
which is what
Appeal,
her character
yeah,
was looking
that
for.
that is what the name is, yeah.
Yeah, it's all about man appeal, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, just some fun facts out of my own brain about Marvel's The Avengers. I'm pretty sure. I remember seeing this film. Obviously, now Marvel is famous for obviously the mid-credit scene, end-credit scene, for example. I don't recall there being a one in the UK version. Obviously, we had the mid-credit
Yes,
scene.
there was. There was. Oh no, sorry, no, I'm being really stupid there. Yeah, the reveal of Thanos. That was the mid-credit.
Yeah, the
scene.
real Thanos, that was it. But I think the UK and the US
The
scenes.
Swarmer
yeah,
scene
shawarma
wasn't
scene
on our
was-
cut.
Yeah, it wasn't on the international version. It was on the American version only. But it's since been
It's
revealed
because we
to
got
UK
it-
audiences on the home release version.
It's because we got it first. I think they added it late.
Yeah, we got it a month. We got it end of April, and they
Yeah,
got it.
they got it a week later.
But was it
Yeah.
was it something stupid like 2 weeks or something?
It was something like that, but they didn't have time to get it onto our version
No, and plus
because they added it really late.
we don't know what
It was
shawarma
really-
is or was.
Yeah. We don't think we sell it here. It might be in London and stuff, but I don't.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so it's certainly not in the
Yeah, I think you find
not
it
in the
cities,
not in the
but
provinces.
no, not in the provinces. That's the phrase I was
But
looking for, Dave.
it's basically kebab.
Yeah, it's got kebab in your food. It's fine. But yeah, very delicious. Apparently, I've had the veggie version. It's yummy. And also another fun fact about the shawarma scene: you see Cap sitting there with his face covered by his hand. Obviously, he was off filming. That film set on a train.
Snowpiercer.
That's the one which we haven't got over here still, bizarrely. But yeah, so he had obviously grown a beard for the role, and he was fitted with like a prosthetic jaw, so he couldn't actually eat
But
properly.
it wouldn't stand up to scrutiny, so it's
No,
like it's
so
there
it's
to
got a
cover
bit
it
of
a bit.
CGI, and he's got his hand covering it all, so it looks quite fun. And they made some
But no
jokes.
no serious team up superhero film's going to CG someone's facial hair, are they? Is it?
Oh,
That would never happen.
That would
no.
be mental.
Oh dear, so funny. So yeah, and apparently the idea to have the chariot attack was actually Joss Whedon's idea. Kevin Feige was like, okay, so we're going to have a portal and aliens are going to come through, but it's up to you to do the rest. So obviously being a huge Marvel fan, he thought, the chariot are ideal for this role. And the whole thing was his doing, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and that's not the facts from my brain. I have many more, but not enough time on this show, unfortunately.
Cool. In which case, social media, folks.
you can find me at Cinematronics on Twitter. You can also find this podcast, as long as my other podcast, but also all the backdated podcasts that maybe aren't on iTunes anymore, at cinematronics.co.uk.
Worth pointing out that it's worth looking on that site as well, because myself and Chris have done 2 volumes of a summer review show this summer. So our summer reviews are now complete, and you can hear what we think of about 15 different films.
Dave, where can we find you?
You can find me at the Pasty Kid 1976 on Twitter.
And you can find us on Twitter at Expect Us to Talk. And you can follow us on Facebook under the same moniker. We're also on YouTube. Just type in Do You Expect Us to Talk? As Chris said, you can listen to us on his website, which is at cinematronics.co.uk. You can also find us on iTunes and Stitcher. On the iTunes, please search for Do You Expect Us to Talk? And if you like us, give us a glowing 5-star review. Helps us to rank higher in the rankings and attract more listeners.
And if you hate us, give us a 5-star review, but maybe frown while you're doing it and swear under your breath.
I bloody hate those bastards. But I'll still give
I wonder what would happen if you gave a 5-star rating, but in the actual written review you said it was shit. I hated it.
Crap.
I wonder what that would do. Would that just confuse everyone?
I'll do it grudgingly.
Give us 5 stars, but call us Mewling Quims.
Oh dear. Or Hoodlebum, please. Also, if you want to drop us an email, you can drop us an email at expectustotalk@gmail.com. Not that many people do these days, apart from Nigerian princes.
Yeah, they do. I thought you were kidding.
No, they do.
Then I had a look through our spam folder, and it's non-stop, that stuff.
It's literally like, hello, my name is Constance.
Yeah,
blah, blah, blah,
and we
and
want to
hello,
send
I
you
am
some
King
money.
So-and-so, a Nigerian prince, though.
It really is. They're not
literally
normally Nigerian, but they are all people offering us cuts of money.
Which is obviously spam.
Which is basically spam from the early fucking 2000s.
Yeah.
In quality.
Still going.
Yeah.
Hello, I am Madam Bovary.
I have a lot of manners. I just need your credit card details.
I know. Still write to us there if you want. We get the odd email, but most of you talk to us over social media, so there's no reason to. We will just announce, though, we have had our first commission, and we've actually received our money for it as well. So in October, we will be doing our first Patreon commission, and it will be a full review of the Brandon Lee film, The Crow. But it will fall outside our normal schedule, so it won't hold anything else up.
Yeah.
Anyway, next, Dave, I believe it's your commentary choice.
It is, which means I'll see us out, which means Do You Expect Us to Talk will return with a commentary on Captain America, the First Avenger.